All right, well, I think we can go ahead and get started. People will maybe filter in as we go, but welcome everyone to the February Consortium webinar. Super happy to have everybody here. Go through here. So we don't have a whole lot of updates from our side, just some bugs we fixed and kind of a plan for the future. There's some new features that we have up and coming, and then we'll see a presentation from Jackie, Peter, and Alyssa. So first update that we have is we've created this thing called a patient profile, which basically enables the clinician or researcher to more easily manage patients. So editing activities like tips, your surveys, any breathing activities. And then you can also more easily change the name here, reset the password. So you don't really have to go through that more cumbersome thing that you are currently doing. So hopefully this will be pushed out by the end of this week or early next week. Do you have any questions on this? Great. And then these are some new features that we have coming up next in our roadmap. So we have a couple new cognitive tests that will be available that some collaborators have developed, as well as scripts to help start just-in-time responses or automations. So this is kind of our bridge between full-on automations and like writing a script and having to do it more manually. But this is now going to be maintained and run by LAMP. And then soon we're also going to have the ability to kind of pick and choose which sensors you'd like to have collecting data. So GPS, accelerometer, those were all or nothing basically before. And now you'll be able to kind of choose which ones you'd like to be collecting on patients. And then as a new update to the patient profile, you will also be able to pick and choose which sensors you are collecting for which patients and which study. Are there any questions on updates? Great. And then I won't go through all of these bugs, but we have fixed a lot of things in the last month, which is great. And on the topic of bugs, we do have a couple current ones that are being fixed that we are aware of. So the blank page issue, which means the app crashed, but it's not really telling the user what's going on. It's just giving you that white blank screen. And then we've heard from some users that push notifications are still not working 100% as they should be. So that is also on our radar and we are working on it. But as I've said the last few webinars, please continue to submit bugs because it helps us so much to see how many people are running into the same issues. But that is all from our side. Does anyone have any questions on bugs before I go forward? Great. All right. So I will hand it over to Jackie, Peter, and Alyssa. They are from MapNet, one of the sites that is currently using LAMP.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa. I'm from MapNet. I don't know if Peter and Jackie wanted to introduce yourselves as well.
I'm Jackie. I am a LEAP Center RA, which you'll hear a little bit more about at McLean Hospital, and we work with MapNet.
My name's Peter Durning. I'm also an RA with Jackie over at the LEAP Center at McLean.
Next slide, please. So to talk a little bit about who we are first, MapNet, which stands for the Massachusetts Psychosis Network for Early Treatment, is an organization that was founded fairly recently, so 2017, in large part due to Congress setting aside funds for first episode psychosis treatment, passed in 2015. And we're classified as what's called a technical assistance center that is housed at Beth Israel, a hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. And a big part of what we do is connect and supporting the different first episode psychosis providers across the state of Massachusetts. That means training providers and evidence-based practices, and also coordinating and encouraging consultation and learning in between different programs. And as I'll be talking about in a little bit, what we've been using LAMP for so far is conducting standardized assessments, which is a big part of what we do, collecting data and tracking treatment outcomes, and then also being able to visualize those treatment outcomes. Next slide, please.
So I can talk a little bit about LEAP. So the LEAP Center stands for the Laboratory for Early Psychosis Center. It was funded in 2019 by the NIMH. And so the LEAP Center aims to develop collaborations, data systems, and methods to better understand the characteristics of first episode psychosis patients and their outcomes and treatments. And so we work really closely with MapNet to collect these standardized assessments on clinical care delivery and patient outcomes using the MapNet battery. And so LEAP reviews the de-identified data collected at the MapNet clinics to assess and improve data collection, and also to get patient and clinician perspectives. And so LEAP data comes from these clinics, plus McLean Hospital, which is where Peter and I work, which is a LEAP Center site that uses an adapted version of the MapNet assessment battery. And we use LAMP to collect that data. Next slide. So Peter and I both work directly with patients in completing their standardized assessments. So the surveys can include clinician-rated scales and self-report measures. So our clinicians complete some surveys and our patients complete some of the other ones. The clinician ones include symptom severity, questions about medication adherence, global functioning scales, and many more. And some of our self-report questionnaires include demographics, the layman's quality of life, Colorado Symptom Index, and the process of recovery questionnaire. And so MapNet sites have the option of using LAMP in different ways. And at McLean in the virtual era, we've been screen sharing on Zoom with our patients. So we are there to provide support as if we would when we were in person. So when we were in person using LAMP, we would hand our clients an iPad logged in with their information ahead of time, and we would just be there to support them. And I have to say, through Zoom, it's been really easy to do. And it was a good transition using the screen share option. And so we did very briefly also use paper questionnaires. And so LAMP has definitely provided some benefits. So for one, everything is in one place. We don't have filing cabinets full of paper questionnaires anymore. Another thing is that the questionnaire is quite long. Instead of handing someone a 25-page paper questionnaire, it can be a little bit overwhelming. The LAMP platform has been really helpful in readability, and it's visually much more attractive. You can actually see on the right side, I've included at the top a little bit of an example of our paper questionnaires, and you can see it could be a little bit overwhelming. And on the bottom, you can see an example of the LAMP questions that we ask. And with the white space and everything, it's much more easy to follow for the patients. We also really appreciate that there is a little bit of positive feedback when we complete them, and it helps keep everyone staying on track during the long assessments. And of course, because it is used in a clinical setting before we turn it into a research setting, it's of course important that it's HIPAA compliant. Next slide.
That's my cue to unmute. So, you know, it's what's nice about LAMP. As we said, everything's in one place. You have all the data collected over, you know, we collect data every 6 months. But, you know, there's also, you know, centers at McLean and other places around Boston where people are collecting data twice a day, which definitely has some advantages. But so what we're doing is using LAMP every 6 months to go through this quite lengthy procedure. It only takes maybe half an hour, but it's, you know, it's there's a lot of questions. And what's nice about it is that it has kind of self-populating graphs. So I know, you know, clinicians that we speak to, if they went through, you know, the REDCap or something similar, you know, and they had to go through and make a graph for every single patient for every single question. I mean, the short, you know, of it is that they wouldn't do that. So, you know, with an already populated graph, they click one button, one tab, and they can see data over, you know, it's collected every 6 months, but people in our clinic are staying for, you know, years at, you know, up to, I don't know, 5 years at a time. So we can see, you know, every 6 months we have quite detailed information in graphical form, which is very easy to read and easy to kind of adapt clinical care, based in this data-driven way. So it's easy for on-track clinicians at McLean's first episode Psychosis Center to go in and check this data, but also, we're working with groups that are, sorry, there's a fire truck outside. We're working with groups that are able to, have this information every couple of days or every day, twice a day, they're collecting information. And what's great about that, it's possible for the clinicians to say, okay, we want the patients to have this information, or, inversely, we don't want the patient to look at this data, but we'll have the data, right? So one thing that I think is very valuable is having the ability to for a patient to come into a psychiatrist's office or a doctor's office in general, and instead of saying, every month they come in and say, hey, 2 weeks ago I was feeling weird and I don't remember why, or whatever else, this is not very helpful information for a psychiatrist or a doctor in general. But if you come in and you say, hey, here's every day I'm making these particular questionnaires, I'm completing these questionnaires. Let's look at the data and let's try to improve one thing every month or whatever it is, right? So the ability to track this information over time is helpful for the clinicians and also for the patients to be able to see and get some feedback for what they're doing, right? They say, well, last month I was working on this and here's all the data that I have, right? Here's the data that I have that can show me, oh, I am making progress in my mental illness, right? I'm making progress in my non-mental illness. So, right, you have this kind of really, really impressive and useful way to collect data and influence care. So what we're able to do at the LEAP Center is not only influence care for that one person, but also look at the data in more of a holistic view. And by doing that, we're able to improve. We have questions, for instance, on clinician ratings, right? How are the clinicians doing? How are they helping out? So we can, as an institution, step forward and say, hey, this is where we're not doing as well. We're doing, well here, but not as well as we'd like to. So being able to look at that data, overall and say, okay, we need to step up this particular aspect of our clinical care. Also super valuable way that we're using this data in real time. That's all for me.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So one last thing that we wanted to touch upon is the fact that as we've been rolling LAMP out, it's been rolled out to a variety of programs. So MapNet works with all these first episode psychosis programs across the state. And some of them are smaller, they're community-based, while others are, like Peter and Jackie described, like larger academic hubs like McLean Hospital. So being able to adapt to the different needs and the different strengths of the different clinics is really, really important. At the same time, we have many different types of people on the treatment team accessing LAMP. So what that means is it's not just one clinician who has access to this patient's data or is working with the patient to complete surveys. Rather, it's all the treatment team working together. So we might have the prescriber who's able to fill out a survey and offer information about what the patient is taking medication-wise. And then when the clinician, who also has their own unique login, is able to be assessing the patient and talking with the patient, and they have a question about what kind of medication the patient takes, they're able to quickly access that rather than, as Jackie was saying, having to pull through all these different filing cabinets. So that allows for this complete picture of the patient, right? Where you're getting different perspectives from prescribers and from the therapist, et cetera. And so when we're setting a program up with LAMP, the first thing that we do is automatically duplicate and generate all of the surveys, all of the questionnaires that are in the MapNet battery. So just to speak a little bit more about that, the MapNet battery is this standardized assessment, similar to what Jackie and Peter were saying at McLean. that's filled out every 6 months, and it is quite lengthy. So we're able to put that all in to this one centralized location and break it up by what the different assessments are. So each program gets that to start with. And then, like I was saying, different programs, have different research interests. So some programs might be interested in looking at cognitive tasks or looking at, the daily fluctuations of mood. So they're then able to go in and create new studies, which can be separate from the MapNet battery, the study that it's contained in. So it's very organized, and they're able to know, okay, I want to complete the battery with this patient. Here's where I go to do that. If I want to be measuring mood with this patient, I'm going to go to this separate study and work on that. So that's one plus that rather than just being a one size fits all model, that different clinics are able to adapt it. Next slide. Yeah, that is all. And we wanted to include a little feedback image that LAMP actually uses.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for presenting, all three of you. That was fabulous. Does anyone have any questions?
So this is Christian Lee. Thank you for the presentation. So I have a question about the push, but the function, what now can be pushed to the phone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So about the push notifications that would go to the patient, am I understanding that correctly? Yeah, so that isn't a feature that we're currently using, just because based on how the pandemic has been going and the virtual format, we've been using the screen share function a lot to administer those assessments and to share data with the patients. So we haven't utilized that yet, to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question then. So you're saying there are lots of different use cases for LAMP, and you have all these different people using it, and you have to train, for instance, a clinician or a prescriber or an RA. And I'm curious, I guess, over different sites who have these different objectives, have you found that there are specific challenges or specific things that are easier to do between sites?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So I think that certain challenges that might come up is the fact that as everyone knows, LAMP is still developing, right? And so there's still so much changing and happening. So, certain sites have so many new surveys they want to add and so much new information and functions that they're interested in. And sometimes it can be a little bit hard to catch up with that, right? To get the app doing what they're imagining. So I would say that's one challenge, but that we've been able to work with the team to adapt to that in the sense that, okay, if they're working on developing this feature for the app, but it's not ready yet, how can we do something similar? How can we use like a placeholder? So that's one thing that we've kept in mind. And then another thing is just that programs, as we talked about, different team members are going to be using the app at different rates, right? So a prescriber might not be using it as often as the clinician is using it. So just being mindful of that and being aware that the app might be unfamiliar to certain team members, and to think about how do we make sure that they know what to do, and when they're sitting across from a patient, they get in there, right? And they're not having to waste any time being confused. So just developing kind of like a list, like a guide for clinicians and for prescribers and any team member using LAMP so that they feel comfortable using it to administer surveys and still putting in like that face time with the client.
Definitely. That's a great solution. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, so other projects largely from BI. So and maybe this is for John. So can researchers outside BI request access to the LAMP or use the LAMP to do research at this point?
So Beth Israel hasn't figured out a way to host it externally. We've asked Beth Israel about this, and it's something they say they're looking into. But the only feasible way that the hospital is letting us do it is basically hosting your own version of LAMP. So it's still the same app, but it kind of, the data has to live somewhere else. So it's technically we can host it. It's more again that I think they're worried about liability in data. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't, I'm still trying to figure this out what they're doing, but we've basically been asking this question of kind of, is it possible to do this and put data somewhere else? But right now, the official word from the hospital is it's not possible. They're having legal team review it now. We've kind of escalated up higher and higher. So we asked the legal team to look at it and figure out, but it must be something around liability or risk because it's not a technical issue, if that makes sense. It's so not the best answer way, but that's what we're being told.
Okay, so but that's in a way is good news. So if researchers like me outside BI, if we are fine with you hosting the data and still doing research somewhere else, is that okay?
So I don't think we can host your data. You have to host your own data, but you can have the app. You can like own it, you can copy it. Like that's the funny part in this, like,
like so we can use.
So
okay.
what is the most valuable part of this? Like the app and the thousands of lines of code, like you all can be owners of LAMP. You can all rebrand LAMP. You can sell LAMP. Like we're not allowed to like facilitate that part of it. So that's where the irony is that we're trying to figure out. So you could have Way LAMP or Florida LAMP, and it's yours. We're not, but like helping people actually store data. That's where the hospital gets confused, and that's where we kind of brought up the we're trying to figure it that way out. So yeah.
Okay, so basically, so we can use it. So we can just host our data.
Yeah, you can own it, Way. You can own it, you can keep it, you just have to host your data somewhere.
Okay, I think, well, that's more than I expected. So yeah, thank you. No, I'm not going to own it. I mean, just use it.
I had a question about the screen sharing. I was wondering if you could talk more about how you're using that with patients.
I think I can take that. So the way that we are technically doing our assessments is that the RAs kind of join the end of someone's therapy session, and then we offer them a separate Zoom link so that the clinician's Zoom is not tied up. And from there, we have the patients, well, when you log in, it kind of shows all of the patient's names. And so we have it preset before we have the patient join the Zoom so that we're already logged into that patient so that no other patient's information is shared. And then from there, we give the patient options so that we can read the questions out loud to them and they can verbally reply to us via Zoom and they can see the questions in front of them, or they can read it and they can just tell us their answers. So it's been working pretty smoothly. I don't know, Peter, if you have anything else to add.
Most people are more than happy to read it themselves and answer, and we just click buttons essentially at that point.
I actually will also add that we've added many questions since we had been doing it in person and on paper. And I almost would say that even with the addition of these questions, using screen share has made it a much quicker process. And I think a lot of that might have to do with the readability of LAMP, but also using screen share, it really has been time efficient. I would definitely say that.
Jack, do you guys have two Zoom accounts? And like there's one that's, are you like transferring, or how does this happen? It's cool, I just don't quite, how are you doing this magic?
So we're just joining the end of a therapy session, the clinicians sharing their Zoom link with us. And then once we kind of introduce ourselves, we give them a new meeting ID. And then we leave that initial Zoom and join the new one so that
Okay.
the original one is freed up for the next patient the clinician is seeing.
Okay. That's a warm handoff in a digital.
It is. It's exactly a warm handoff.
Thank you. I really like that idea. I'll have to try that out.
That's cool.
Any other questions?
So I noticed on the chart, so the examples of the chart, so there is a sleep and a social together, that data. So I'm just curious how to differentiate whether it's reflecting the sleep pattern or the social pattern, or whether you can, maybe from the background, can you create different charts, one social, one sleep, something like that.
Are you referring to the slide that I was covering?
Yeah, I forgot whose presentation that was. Yeah.
So the chart that I can maybe pull it up again. But to be clear, that's not our actual data. But if you do go through the data, I think the prevent tab on, oh, thank you. If you go through and go to the prevent tab of LAMP, you can see this data. You can see this data per question, right? So there's 12 questions in one survey or something like that. Each question you can see a separate, a separate graph for that question over time. Maybe John knows more about the sleep data or the social data in this particular example. I think this is just from the LAMP website.
I can speak to that. So this particular data that you'll see on the prevent tab that they've shown is the activity data. So surveys and all those responses. What we're working to add, and I am not the end all be all, like I don't know everything about where this is, but there are different passive data sensors that are also available. So we calculate sleep time, we calculate sedentary time, we calculate all of those things from passive data from features that our data team has developed. And we're in the process of adding those to the app, that prevent screen. And so there's going to be a little named Cortex, and it works the same way as it would with the activity sensors, activity data rather, but with the sensor data now. And so you can add, we have a really cool chart that kind of shows the breakdown of active time, sedentary time, and sleep time per day. And it's bucketed into different 24-hour bar graphs. It's really interesting. I would really encourage anybody who's gathering passive data to go and check it out once it's ready. I don't want to speak to if it's not or if it is yet, but I believe it's coming soon if it's not already there. And we also have step count, I think, in the works. So that should be showing up as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. And I just wanted to let everyone know the webinar next month will actually be at 3 p.m. Eastern time. I'll be sending out a reminder email, but it is to accommodate one of our partners who is in a different time zone. So just giving that reminder now. Thank you so much again, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.